All right, we've got robots. So why don't we just start with you, Rodolphe? Tell us about Pepper and what Pepper's designed to do.
So Pepper is this cute humanoid robot that has been designed to welcome people in shops. That's the reason why he has big eyes to have a look on you, big ears to hear you, and this tablet to explain you if you need more detail about the products you want to buy or you want to. And today it's used in many shops, mainly in Japan, and soon in US. We have some tests in France, in Europe as well, and things are pretty well with it today.
Mm-hmm. All right, Tessa, how about your robot?
So this is Relay. Relay is hospitality's first service delivery robot. He delivers room service to guests in hotels. So you're staying in your hotel, it's late at night, you want a snack, you call down to the front desk, and they send it up via Relay. And 5 minutes later, it arrives at your door. He can take the elevators. When he gets to your room, he doesn't have an arm, so he can't knock, but he calls your phone, and he tells you that he's there, and you can pick up your item.
Mm-hmm. And Melonee, I think we have a video of your robot. And
Yeah.
while that's playing, why don't you tell us about Fetch Robotics?
Yeah, so, well, robots are kind of hard to travel with. So our robots are made for logistics applications. So we do warehousing robots that help goods get from point A to point B within a facility.
Mm-hmm. I think we have a video somewhere. Hopefully that'll play so you guys have an idea of what Melonee's robot looks like.
Yeah, somewhere. Oh,
There we go.
Yeah, so that's the freight robot. It's very cleverly named. It works with other humans within the warehouse, and it does transportation of goods. And we make it in different sizes so that you can move pieces, cases, and pallets.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, all of your robots are out in the world right now doing stuff in warehouses and hotels and malls and such. But Rodolphe and Tessa, your robots are designed more for social interaction, right? They interact with people on a regular basis. So but at the same time, they're very differently designed. So Rodolphe, maybe starting with you, can you tell us about how you came up with the design for Pepper?
Yeah, for this robot, interaction is so important that we wanted to have a robot that you fall in love at first sight. So that's why the appearance is so important. And not only the appearance, but also the behavior, the way it moves. We also think to use it for an elderly person, for instance. And that the first time we discussed with elderly person about robotics to assist them, they say, oh, no, we don't want robotics. They were horrified by robots. But when I show my robot, and I show them my robot, they say, oh, it's so cute. What could he do for me? And only the word robot was horrifying for them, but this object was completely charming. So that's the reason why the appearance for this very social robots is so important. And we have put a lot of effort in the appearance and this gesture, all these little gestures that gives life to it.
Mm-hmm. And Tessa, your robot's much different looking, but it's also interacting with people all the time. So how did you come up with that design?
Yeah, well, I mean, our robot starts with functionality first, right? It's a delivery robot. But we also know that in order for robots to really take off and be successful, people have to love them. And so we designed Relay from the ground up to be cute and adorable, emotive, and actually have a personality. Right now he has a set of blinky eyes that communicate with you to tell you what he's thinking and where he's looking. And we did this partly because he's operating in semi-hostile environments, in hotels or other places. There are drunk people, there are kids, there are luggages, there are pets. And so we wanted him to be able to survive and thrive in that kind of environment. And one of the ways he does that is by being cute, and you want to help him.
Mm-hmm. Now, Melonee, you're not in hotels, you're in warehouses, but your robots are still interacting with people. So can you describe what they do and how that works?
Yeah, so really the way I guess a picker interacts with the robot is they basically put the packages onto the robot, and then they use the touchscreen interface on the robot or a tablet interface to trigger whatever the destination is for the robot. And it is a lot about creating a friendly design because there is a lot of bad PR around robots and jobs, and so you have to ingratiate the robot into their presence.
Mm-hmm. And all of these robots are working in environments where they're working with people, right? And they're not necessarily taking jobs away. They're doing jobs that people don't really want to do, or they're assisting people with their jobs and making them more efficient. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, is that actually a problem?
It's an issue, so we have to take that into account. And of course, today, I don't think that the robot can take the work of somebody, because it's very simple. But it can be here where a service is missing. For instance, in shops, it can give simple information, and that nobody would spend time on it. But you have to be very careful in the position you give to your robot. For instance, in Europe, because we have a big trouble with unemployment, you cannot really say, okay, my robot will replace the work of someone. But it can help, it can assist. For instance, we have used this robot in a railway station in France. And maybe, in France, the SNCF unions are very strong. So you cannot say, okay, I put the robot to replace someone. But the robot is here to give information that the guy who sells the ticket is not really ready to give the information, like where is the closest bakery where I can drink something. So then the robot is here to help and to give a better experience to the user. And for instance, a good application for this robot in Japan wouldn't be a good application in Europe or in US. You really have to adapt the work and the task of your robot to the culture and the country where you want to use it.
And Tessa, is that the same for you? You're not taking the job of a person?
It's not about taking jobs, it's about empowering people to do more with the help of robot assistance. And one of the stories I like the best about one of our customers, were using Relay to carry on a pen pal conversation with a girl who was staying at their hotel. And she would write notes and she would put them into Relay, and Relay would take them down to the front desk, and the front desk would write a note back pretending to be the robot and then send it up to the girl in her hotel room, and they would keep her entertained. It was actually while her brother was sick, and so they were stuck in their hotel room for a couple of days. And so the staff has figured out a very creative way to use Relay to supplement their own ability to make their guests happy.
And Melonee, I think it's a little more complicated in your industry, because you have some people doing some of these, like moving things around jobs in warehouses. So how does that come in?
Yeah, I think that there's no there, to be honest, with jobs. In the United States, there's 600,000 jobs going unfilled. People don't want to do these jobs anymore. There's 25% turnover, and really, these companies have to increase productivity, and automation is the way to do it, because they can't get enough people to do the jobs. And this is just getting worse and worse, because the average age of a picker is actually much older than you would expect. And those people are starting to retire, or they have back issues, knee issues, other health issues that are precipitated by walking a lot, and our robot actually helps remove some of that walking. The other thing that's really fun and interesting, and this is robots for saving lives, there's about 800,000 forklifts in the United States, and a person dies about every 3 days from a forklift accident. So if you work in a facility with forklifts, you're twice as likely to die from a forklift than a car accident, and you're 7 times more likely to be injured. And so these robots also help with limiting the interaction between walking pedestrians and other vehicles within a facility. So it actually is a double, or actually a triple win in many cases, for increasing efficiency, reducing health benefits and workman's comp, and safety, increasing safety.
And your robots are working directly with people, making them more efficient. Like, how do the people feel about that?
Yeah, it's at first there's a lot of concern, because people have this perception that the robot's coming in to take their job. But many of them have a very strong, happy reaction within the first week of working with the robots. A gentleman actually said that he thought he could work an extra 5 years because his knees weren't going to hurt as much. And what's really interesting is we can tell that they really love the robots, because instead of naming them like George or Tom, they name them Batman and Superman. and having that kind of like interest and excitement about a robot to name it a superhero, I think is a little bit indicative of how they feel about the robots.
Yeah, yeah. Now, your robots all, to some extent, depend on having people around for them to be functional. Is that correct? Like, it works directly with people, like Pepper and Relay also?
Yeah, the paper is autonomous in a way that it can interact with a visitor. So I don't know if you say where it's working with people, but there is no co-worker with Pepper. Pepper is interacting with the visitor, giving information, but of course, sometimes Pepper will understand that she cannot give the good answer, she doesn't understand the question, so then she will call a vendor. But it means that more and more customer could be served by the robot, and the human can be here just for complex situations, and then the robot can say, okay, it's not my job anymore, and the human will help me and will help you.
Yeah. In average in a hotel, it takes about 7 minutes round trip to get an item up from the front desk to the guest room and back. And that's 7 minutes during which someone is like standing there waiting for the elevator, walking down the hallway. And that's something where the robot can really help. And so we designed Relay to actually ferry things, to relay things from one person to another. So there's one person at the front desk who puts items in, and there's the guest at the room who takes items out. So it's meant to work in conjunction with people.
Yeah, so to what extent does the effectiveness of robots in the workplace depend on having humans around? Like, what's the state of the art in autonomy? And at what point are robots going to say, okay, we don't need humans around anymore, we can just do our own thing?
Well, in the service industry, there's always going to be people, because the heart of good service and hospitality is really understanding what people want and helping create the personalized experience just for them. And it's going to be a long time, I think, until robots can actually do a lot of that. What robots can do is they can make some aspects of service a lot more predictable, a lot more automated. So for example, delivery times to your room, if you don't want to wait 30 minutes or more for your room service, you can wait 5 minutes and have a robot do it. And so I think it's going to be, for the near future and probably for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a mix of humans and robots working together.
Well, the fact is that there's already lights-out manufacturing facilities in the world. There's
Can you describe what that means?
Lights out means that there are actually no active workers on the floor. The lights in the facility are actually turned off, and they produce cars. There's actually several lights out facilities that already do that. But the thing is that there's still the operators that monitor the system. There's still the people who go and repair the robots. There's a whole network of people and other jobs associated with just deploying and maintaining robotic systems. So no matter what, whether or not you go to a fully automated system, you're always going to need the plus one to repair the robot, and I don't see people getting out of the equation anytime soon.
And to some extent, all three of you have robots operating in what you might call semi-structured environments, where you're familiar to some extent with the environment you're operating in. Maybe you have a map, you know it's not going to change that much. How much of an obstacle is that to kind of deploying robots in more places, and what kind of things are we going to have to do technologically in order to get robots kind of out into the world more?
Well, I think that's a complex question, obviously. And I think that people are making good headway into dealing with more and more unstructured environments. The warehouses are semi-structured, but whole pallets move around, and the topology of the warehouse changes very rapidly. And right now, our system can tolerate about 60 to 70% change in the environment. But I think that what you're going to see is a general progression of us slowly changing our environments to make it easier for robots to come into our lives. I mean, the autonomous cars are kind of a very good example of an extremely unstructured problem, and the time horizon for that is still a couple decades out, I personally believe, in terms of you or I owning an autonomous car. But I'm not even sure we're going to own autonomous cars, because that's kind of a moot point. You should probably not own it. You should do ride sharing. But I think that if you look at going into the home, it's really about, can we do things to assist the robots? Can we have special dishes? Can we have special furniture to make it easier? And people already do this with their Roombas. They pick up all the stuff on the floor so that the Roomba cleans the house. And so I think we've already developed a culture of assisting robots to be effective in our unstructured environments. The question is how do we help them culturally adapt to these environments and semantically explain to them what we actually want them to mean, and it really comes down to usability long term.
Mm-hmm. And what's it been like in hotels? And I imagine that as you expand beyond hotels and environments get different and more complicated, what kinds of problems do you have to solve?
Yeah, there's a lot of changing environments, as Melonee said. One of the things that we watch carefully is that there's a lot of research going on in the robotics community about how to solve some of these problems. And a lot of these problems are sort of the cutting edge of what can be done today with robotics. And so what we're really excited about is that there's a lot of progress being made on a number of different fronts that will all end up helping robots eventually deal with all of this chaos and unstructured environments. I talked to several startups here right now that are doing image recognition or machine learning or data processing to try to make sense of the world based on camera data. You know, all of that stuff is technology that will eventually help robots figure out what's going on in the world and how can they deal with it.
Rodolphe, how are you able to go into, say, a business that's never even thought about using a robot like Pepper in this capacity before and say, oh, you know, this robot can actually be helpful and actually do stuff? How do you cross that kind of first kind of perception gap that you need to convince them that it's a real thing that can work?
Today the robot has been designed for welcoming people in shops, but we see many people bringing new ideas to how to use the robot in completely different situations. And this robot has been used for education, for instance, and and of course we have in mind to use it for assistance to elderly person, and then the collaboration between human and robots will be again different, because of course there will be the cooperation between the robot and the elderly person himself or herself, but also with the human assistant that will come someday during the day sometimes, and then the robot will share with the human assistants the experience, what happened during the day. So this collaboration between these three people will be very, very interesting for us, and we have a lot of improvement to bring in a robot to have a good understanding of the situation and what should be transferred to the human assistant and what should be private, for instance. That there are so many questions that will come.
Mm-hmm. So over the long term, or say the next 10 or so years, and you're all working very hard to make robots even more capable, it does seem like, and you should feel free to disagree with me, that some jobs will gradually disappear and be taken over by hardware automation. I mean, do any of you disagree that that's going to happen?
I think that there will be job displacement.
Okay.
I think that there's going to, I mean, to be perfectly honest, this is not a technology problem. Technology should progress. Mm-hmm. This is a socio-economical, political discussion, and it really should be tendered as that. I really wish we would start having that discussion instead of continuously looking at robots and saying bad robot. Because job displacement is going to happen. We need to change our culture to lifelong learning. We need to really think about how people are going to need to be retrained to handle the new technology. Some of the burden does fall on roboticists because we need to make the systems more usable so that the burden of the technology that they need to learn is very low. And that's one of the big bets that Fetch has taken, is we've invested a lot of time and energy into usability, into making it easier for people without technology educations to interface with and use our robots. Because this job displacement is happening, it will happen, and we're going to need these people to manage our robots, fix them, repair them, install them, and there's going to be a lot of jobs to do that, but we need people that are technically trained to do it.
I think one of the best things that people can do now to prepare is to really learn how to use computers as tools, because robots, just like computers, are going to be tools. They are tools already, and to the extent that people can understand how they can use this piece of technology to make them more effective or more productive, everyone wins. You know, there's more jobs out there. There's more people who can actually use robots to do something important in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some new jobs will appear. When you say displacement, that's a nice word. For instance, we need a lot of people to teach jokes to the robot. So we have people writing jokes for the robot, imagining the dialogue the robot can have with people. Today, the artificial intelligence is not ready for the robot to create and to the dialogue. So we have to prepare all the dialogue. So we need plenty of guys imagining all the discussion you can have with the robot, and that's a completely new job in robotics. And there will be so many new jobs that we don't even imagine today.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned that artificial intelligence you don't think is quite ready, and I'm just curious, what are some of these maybe overhyped things about robots? Like, what are some of the technical problems that we need to solve before robots can get to this point that I think a lot of people think that they're at already?
That's a hard question. I would say that one of the next big challenges for robots, for generic use, and the notion that you can walk up to a robot and say, "Hi, robot," and the robot will actually respond and say, "Hey, how's it going?" Is really semantic understanding of the world, the ability to do vision processing in unstructured environments. I mean, people look at Facebook and they say, "Oh, it can recognize all these faces, it can know what a dog is," but we actually, as people, do a lot of pre-processing. We center the subject in the photo, we make sure it's well lit, we make sure that we can see all the people's faces are pointing forward most of the time. And so there's a lot of pre-processing that we do, but if you ask a robot to go into a room and find someone, the lights could be very low, the person could be wearing a hat, they could be wearing something highly reflective, and all of those things play havoc with the sensors. And I think that perception and understanding semantically what's going on is a big problem, especially when you go and buy a hand-carved cup from Fiji. Like, how do you explain that to a robot? I mean, it just doesn't work.
One of the most common requests we get for Relay is that people want him to bring them a beer. And the challenge in that is that, yeah, sure, he can bring it to you, but he doesn't know what a beer is. He doesn't know how to open the fridge. You might not even know where your fridge is unless you teach him. And so I think all of that is semantics, as Melonee is saying. And it's really about how do we imbue our systems with the ability to understand what we're saying to them and respond appropriately. And that's a really interesting frontier.
Yeah, and that must be a challenge for Pepper as well, because it has arms, it has hands, it has a head. How do you control that expectation that someone who meets Pepper for the first time has?
Yeah, that's very difficult, because when you see Pepper, you talk to it exactly like to a human being, and that's one of the reasons why it's not too similar to a human. So you see that it's a machine, and his voice is not exactly a human voice. So we try to keep the distance to explain, okay, it's not a human, it's still a robot with the limitations. And it's true, everybody say, okay, artificial intelligence, deep learning, blah, 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 but it's difficult to learn all this, common sense. We had a very nice speech this morning explaining what is a common sense for a robot. If you have to learn everything you know to a robot, it will take decades, and if you have to show to the robot millions of beer for it to understand what is a bottle of beer, okay, so really have to find another way, a new way to train the robot, and for them to be, to really share our understanding and to share the semantics of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if any of you want to help teach Pepper what a beer is, there is some upstairs, right?
Yes, absolutely. You can play with Pepper on the first floor, on the second floor here, you say, and we'll be more than happy for you.
Okay, and hopefully Relay will walk around too a little bit, and so come see the robots, and thank you all very much.